Welcome everyone back for another episode of Q&A with Sharon and George. I was my mother's caregiver after she was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Unfortunately, she passed on 1/1/2020. We started together for Sharon.com in her memory. Today I have an incredible guest and actually out of the US, which is amazing. But that's what I love about technology. It brings people in the field together, and that's why I feel really close and even family with our guest, Emma Edwards. And I'm going to allow her to introduce herself, but she's been somebody who's been so supportive to me, my family. Obviously, we've interviewed before, but I was really excited to have not just someone from out of the US, but also someone who's such an incredible, inspiring person. And I follow her daily. I recommend you all. So I just want to welcome you, Emma.
Thank you. My gosh, so it's afternoon over here in England. I'm coming from, so I live in Cornwall, which is right, if you think about Scotland is at the top and England is in the Southwest Peninsula, and it's beautiful down here today. And it's surrounded by sea, sort of whichever sort of angle I take, I'm sort of about 15 minutes away from the sea. So it's lovely. And it's lovely to be here. Thank you, George, for inviting me.
Yeah.
So I'm a Parkinson's specialist nurse, and I have been for the last 14 years. But in the background of that, I've been a registered mental health nurse for, gosh, it's a long time, about 30 years now. I started incredibly early, the day after my 18th birthday. My parents were both mental health nurses. I've had a really interesting career. Half of my career has been supporting people with mental health problems in the community, on the wards and in hospitals. And the last sort of 14, 15 years has been in the community, looking after people with Parkinson's and supporting their families in their home.
Well, it's really an honor to have you here. I think it's so beautiful. The description of I think we should have a different background for you. But I could probably talk for hours just about your incredible country. So we'll stick to try to Parkinson. But
Okay.
what got you into the specific area? Because obviously nursing is not an easy field. I admire nurses. They were really helpful when my mother wasn't doing quite well. But this world wouldn't revolve if it wasn't for the nursing industry. Maybe you can talk about what got you into specifically the Parkinson's world, and also
Yes, of
some
course.
of the, trials and tribulations of even becoming a nurse, and maybe differences between where England and the US.
Yeah, of course. Well, I first heard about Parkinson's nurses. I was running a residential home for older people in beautiful part of Cornwall called Bude, and that is by the sea. And we had a chap with Parkinson's, a retired postman, and he had like a vast array of Parkinson's medications. And I remember saying to the GP, so like his doctor, my gosh, this needs a review. His medications need a review. And he said, I'm not going to touch them because this particular Parkinson's nurse is in charge. So I called her up, and she came up, and she was wonderful. And the medications for this chap was they were becoming a little bit too strong, so she needed to reduce them to sort of relieve some of his hallucinations that he was having. And I thought, my God, what an interesting job you have. And I said this to her, and she said, well, actually, I'm leaving. And she said, do you know what? You should apply for it. And I thought, I can't do that. That seems to be a general nurse role. So in this country, in Britain, we have general nurses, we have mental health nurses, we have learning disability nurses, and the Parkinson's nurse is traditionally a general nurse's role. But she said there are so many aspects of Parkinson's that affect mental health. It would be a really interesting dynamic to have a mental health nurse in this role. So I applied for the job. I successfully got it. And I started my career as a Parkinson's nurse down here in Cornwall. And Parkinson's nurses, so we've been around. The first Parkinson's nurse in the whole world was created in Cornwall, actually, about 35 years ago by a fantastic doctor called Dr. Doug McMahon, who was, I think he was a neurologist down here. And there was a brilliant nurse called Sue Thomas. So they both together created this role. They saw that after the patient and their family left the consultation room in the hospital after they'd seen their doctor, there was a need for them to be followed up perhaps at home with their medication if any tweaks had been made by the doctor, or sometimes just some eyes on the family at home just to see if, you know, they were coping okay or they needed any equipment, for example. So they got they employed a nurse called Rosemary Maguire. So she is the first one. She was the first one of us, and she did the role, gosh, for many, many years. And then from there, other areas of Great Britain decided, they thought, well, this sounds really good. This would be really helpful in our teams. So now I think it's the whole of the UK. So that includes, so this is another thing we do for British, is that we say Great Britain, England, United Kingdom. It sort of means the same. So United Kingdom, what we mean by that is England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, or Northern Ireland. And so in the whole of the United Kingdom, we have now about 515 Parkinson's nurses in the country, which is absolutely fantastic. We have big caseloads, and that's one of the challenges of being a Parkinson's nurse. So we have, the last count, I think we had about 153,000 people with Parkinson's in the UK, and we've got the 515 nurses, which in theory is about 300, 400 people each. In practice, we know it's not like that. So some nurses have maybe 700, 800 people on their caseload that they support, and others might have 250. So it's sort of, it's sort of not evenly distributed in the country. But anyway, it's a great job. I absolutely love it. So part of my role is to meet people with Parkinson's very early on in their journey, with their family, and just make sure that they are really educated and empowered about their choices and their treatment choices when it comes to Parkinson's. So we work along the local, we work with the local neurologists and the geriatricians. We support people with their medication. So part of my role, or a large part of my role, is medication optimization. And I'm sure you remember this with your mum, George. The medications are sort of vital, aren't they, to control of management of Parkinson's. So part of my role is to make sure that people are on the right medication treatment plan, and if not, to tweak it, maybe tweak that levodopa, maybe add in dopamine agonists and COMT inhibitors, and I can prescribe that medication myself. So I spend a lot of time writing prescriptions, and then I monitor to make sure that people are responding effectively to that medication. And then once we've kind of got them on an even keel, we'll then ask the local general practitioner in their local sort of GP surgeries to take over that prescribing. So Parkinson's nurses are often that first point of contact for families, for people with Parkinson's, and we can signpost people off as well. And again, I don't know how it's set up in the States, but we work with a wider multidisciplinary team. So what that means is that we have access to physiotherapists, occupational therapists, dietitians, speech and language therapy. We work closely with charities. So Parkinson's UK is the big one in this country. Also Spotlight YOPD, which is an amazing charity that I'm a trustee with, actually supporting people with young onset Parkinson's. Cure Parkinson's Trust is also incredible with all that research they're doing. So we may link in with that. But we also, something that's really close to my heart, and one of the reasons that I love the work that you're doing, George, is that I work with a local organisation called Caring for Carers. And that, I think, is essential, that as much as we look after the person with Parkinson's, is that we ensure that the family is supported too. So I run carers groups, we run it on, so we started it actually online. We recognised that, well, it was, oh my gosh, back in, the early days of the pandemic, everything shut down, and it was so stressful for everybody, and people were feeling so isolated, and care partners and families were, you know, finding it, well, yeah, isolating and difficult to cope, especially with their traditional support groups and sort of shut down. So we put it online, a support group, and it's just run for the last 4 years, and it's been a joy to me to be part of that, to work with care partners, and hopefully, and I do get good feedback from it, is that it's supportive for them as well. So and we run that alongside, as I said, this Caring for Carers organisation, and they come along as well, so we co-facilitate it. But to be honest, the care partners pretty much run it themselves. And we also now have a sort of a coffee morning, which is run by a lady who looked after her husband until he died with Parkinson's. And it's very informal, it's a drop-in, and it's just another way of support for people.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a lot of important information and comparisons from the US. One thing that I find even more admirable is the background in your education, is being able to be almost knee to knee with individuals, the families, and the people diagnosed with Parkinson's. One of the areas I thought was tough wasn't my mother, we think, had late onset dementia also. So the symptoms, maybe you could talk a little bit about Parkinson's is one thing, but then when you mentioned hallucinations and delusions, that's even tougher. I had a lot of trouble because I was alone many of the days with my mother, and the nurse would come in and out, which I felt great support. But how does it feel? Maybe you could describe, sitting with someone maybe newly diagnosed, and we can't promise them the future because it's so different to every person, but just to keep them hopeful, like my mother loved that hope, but because she kept saying, I want to live to see her grandkids' wedding. But the reason I never lied is the doctors kept saying things, but we couldn't predict. We never dreamt she would pass at the young age of 69. She didn't have any other medical issues. But I just wonder, even for me, it was tough. But how do you keep kind of hope alive for individuals, but also in your mind, knowing that it's, you have to be always honest? I'm just curious what your thoughts.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we do is we run these newly diagnosed groups. So we speak to people about what Parkinson's might look like in the future. But like you said, you have to balance that with hope. And what I find is that engaging people in research especially can give people hope, and it's a really altruistic thing to do, and I think that also helps if they're feeling a burden as well. So research is a brilliant way of kind of carrying on that sort of that hopefulness, and we know when you lose hope, mental health crashes as well. But like you say, it's about being realistic as well. So what I always say to the people that I work with is that you'll never be discharged from my caseload. I will be with you throughout this journey, and there will be challenges. So we're trying to sort of introduce early on. And I think as well, people kind of know that this is a progressive condition. So we kind of outline that in the future, things will change, as it does when we get older as well. But with this condition, you'll need more support with your mobility. But this is why it's really helpful to meet with people every 6 months, every year, or when they feel they need us, they can call us. Something as well that we introduce, maybe not sort of on day one, but maybe a few years into the condition, is something called advanced care planning. And what that is looking at what you would like in the future to happen to you. So it's a delicate conversation to have, and it's called different things in different areas. So some people may call it like a living will, others might call it sort of advanced directives. But an advanced care plan is something about what would you like to happen when you can no longer make those decisions. And I kind of say to people that it's something that everybody should have, not just people with Parkinson's. It's a conversation that we should be having with our family, perhaps documenting, so that when it's more difficult for you to make decisions, or God forbid, you know, you fall over and you're unconscious, you know, your family know what you want. And this is for everybody. This is not just for people with Parkinson's, but it is important for people with Parkinson's to have that conversation. So we kind of introduce it, like I said, not immediately, but we start to discuss that and weave that into our conversations and consultations with people. But it is, there's no getting away from it, is it, George? It's heartbreaking to see your loved one struggle. And you know, and nurses and other sort of supportive services in this country are there to help pick you up as well. So from a care partner's perspective, we have something that's enshrined in law. So there's the thing called the Care Act of 2014, which says that every carer, every unpaid carer, is entitled to a carer's assessment. And so what that means is that your needs are assessed and hopefully then from there supported. And obviously with the person with the Parkinson's, it's our job as nurses and, you know, our colleagues, our wider multidisciplinary colleagues, to ensure that the loved one, the person with Parkinson's, is supported in all aspects as we go along. But you have to be honest as well. You have to have these honest conversations that things are changing in the Parkinson's, so this is what we need to look at now. But we're yeah, it's that balance of hope but realism as well, as early as you know, as the person can take it.
I have a follow-up question, but as I do that, I just wanted to share a little bit about, so basically we do these podcasts or talks, not just to hang out early in the morning on Saturday, but also because it's so beautiful out and we're inside, but because I feel that awareness is important, but also funding. So I just wanted to show everyone, first, this is an incredible interview you did with me. I think it was in February. So thank you for that. If anyone's interested, you can actually see a lot more, the links and how to contact Emma. So go to togetherforsharon.com and click interviews and you'll see Emma. But something important as you touch on was in one of the organizations you're on the board. How come, my big question now, which I think is really important for our talk today, is how can people not just support you, Emma, but also organizations that will help, you know, fund different resources. I just want more funding, whether it's from the government. I don't know if you know, I mean, you're probably aware, but Parkinson's disease, for some reason in the US, has really never even been talked about. Thankfully, last December 2023 was the first time in US political legislative history they passed the national plan to end Parkinson's disease. Unfortunately, still at the Senate, so we don't know how many years or if it'll even pass. So until it passes and then the president signs it into law, it's still not there. But I wonder if there's more in the UK or in England that will help support your work and all those in the Parkinson's community. But how can we all, even from the US, help? Obviously, if everyone has time, please support Emma and go to Spotlight YOPD.org, but maybe you can touch for a moment on the this organization.
Yeah, no, it's a great organization. I joined it last year. So we don't really have accurate figures across the world about how many people with Parkinson's get diagnosed under the age of 50. We kind of go, I think it was the Michael J. Fox Foundation actually that wondered whether it was sort of 1 in 10 people. So in this country, I think traditionally, and I think I'm guilty of it really, of treating people with younger onset Parkinson's in the same way maybe as older people, when in fact they've got very different needs. So it's about raising awareness in clinicians about the different challenges, but also raising awareness about Parkinson's in everybody, especially younger people. We do a podcast around about it's about sort of every fortnight or so, and we just started that up, and that's called YPod, and that's myself and people with Parkinson's that were diagnosed early on, just talking about their lives. their, the importance of the last podcast we did was about the importance of exercise, and the challenges sometimes when people find it difficult to exercise. So it's an absolutely fantastic organisation that our chief executive is Carl Beach, who's he's over all of the social media, so Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Yeah, there he is, Carl. So we've got he's absolutely madly passionate about raising awareness, and it links in quite nicely with his recent work with our government. So our present sort of government have been in power for 14, actually the amount of time that I've been a Parkinson's nurse, and without trying to be political, it is very difficult when you talk about this present government, but funding has been reduced for various reasons into our national health system. They'll say it isn't, but it's much more difficult to access funding, especially for neurological conditions. And what we also find is that there are health benefits and financial benefits that people with disability in this country are entitled to apply. But it's incredibly difficult to get the challenges of living with Parkinson's. And again, I'm sure you remember this, George, the variability of how people are from day to day, hour to hour. So our CEO, Carl, has been to meet members of Parliament to discuss the challenges of people with the condition. And there he is holding his box from the Movers and Shakers Parky Charter, which I'll talk about in a moment. So he's been discussing that with members of Parliament. Every now and again, a constituent in the community will go to their member of Parliament and say, look, more funding needs to be there for Parkinson's nurses, more funding needs to be there for neurologists. So that brings me on to what has recently happened. So in April 12th, for International Parkinson's Awareness Day, there are a group of podcasters called the Movers and Shakers. I don't know if you've heard of them, George. They're fantastic. And if you ever get an opportunity to get one of them on the podcast here, they would be a joy to interview. So it's 4 or 5 journalists and a judge that have Parkinson's, and they discuss on their podcast all different aspects, and they have some wonderful scientists and neurologists, people that are doing some brilliant work, and I think they've had nurses on there as well. And they've put together a Parky Charter. And one of those things is that they are absolutely peeved that there's limited access to neurologists and doctors. So there's long waiting lists, unfortunately, in the National Health Service to see a neurologist. So it used to be, if you got referred, it used to be about 12 weeks, if not sooner, from that GP referral to, if you initially were displaying those symptoms, to get the diagnosis or not. And now we're looking at it's sort of 8 or 9 months. It's a long time unless you pay privately. So one of the things that the Parky Charter, the Movers and Shakers have put this sort of wish list together, and one of those is about getting access to healthcare professionals that are specialists in Parkinson's as soon as possible, getting information about Parkinson's as soon as possible, having access to research as soon as possible, and also having access to that wider multidisciplinary team. So they put this sort of charter together, and they got thousands of people from all over the country to sign it. I think they had about 30,000 signatures. And then they took this charter to the Prime Minister at 10 Downing Street in London to say, we demand a better service from the National Health Service. I think they went on later to meet with some ministers from the health department. So that dialogue is there. I mean, Parkinson's UK, Cure Parkinson's Trust, Spotlight YOPD, they've all been meeting with ministers. But I think there's nothing like patient power, people power. And they're kind of saying, we've had enough, we want better care. So who knows? Who knows? We're in an election year, which are you, is it the same in the US? Are you in an election year for your president?
Yeah, it's coming, unfortunately. It's always all the fighting and the usual and the same in every country.
It's the same over here. So they make lots of promises. Usually, so the NHS, was is something that is so dear to everybody that lives in this country. It's care which is free at the point of access. So it's one of the biggest employers in the country as well. But it's expensive to run. Sick people don't make money for people for the government, so it's an expensive thing to run. However, and more people are more people are living longer now, and have these multi sort of comorbidities as well. So it's an expensive service to run for the people of the UK, but it's something in an election year that often sort of it comes out again. So lots of promises are made. So to go back to your point about money and funding for research, they'll make all sorts of promises, but it's always, will that be delivered? So I'm kind of holding my breath. I do think that the polls are pointing to a new government, a new party. So we'll see, but certainly funding comes for Parkinson's research comes from a variety of sources in this country, drug companies, universities. I think there are bits from the government as well. So we need to keep that going so that we can, we strive for a cure, don't we, ultimately?
Yeah.
Go on.
One thing that I find amazing in a sad way, but then a good way. So I've just published my book about my mother's journey, and thanks. And the reason I only bring it up is when you go through this tough times, and it's heartbreaking. I don't have my best friend, my mother, and we'll have Mother's Day actually tomorrow. And but I always say, out of the darkness there comes light, like you and all those I've met in the world, really. I didn't know my mother passed 4 years ago. Only 2 years ago, I realized, because of the World Parkinson's Congress, I never heard of it, that there were 10 million people around the world with it. And it kind of sunk my heart, because I thought, I don't want anyone to go through this again. And that's when I learned to, thankfully, again, for social media, to meet such inspiring people like you. While you were talking, I know you probably saw I was sharing, it's just sad to see so many beautiful faces having to go through this fight. But it's been incredible. I was just scrolling, I don't know if you know Adam well, but Adam's become like a brother to me.
Oh, amazing.
There's so many of those people I actually know, which would never have been possible if it wasn't for people like you or social media, or how I feel that we're all family in this fight, because there's really just one, the great thing, I'm going to stop sharing this, but great thing about politics in our scenario is it's bipartisan, and politics don't matter because we all want to cure. I don't think there's many things that everyone can completely agree in this world anymore. And that's the one thing I think that binds and bounds us all together. And that's why, again, I'm so grateful to have you here today. Shifting a little, we don't have a lot of time, but there's so much I wanted to ask you. We talked, maybe you could touch, round it out about mental health, because in the United States, it's been a big issue in the country for the last 5 years, which is pretty new. Also, one thing we never talk about, which I know you can, is I don't want to get into a long story, but I didn't follow my own. The number one rule they say is take care of your own health first. Like you, I mean, you're an incredible nurse. If you're not healthy, you're not going to help your patients. Well, you have a higher standard because it's that's your duty a little. But when I was caregiving for my mother or taking care of her, I wanted to be there for her 24/7, because for some reason, when I was there, she felt safe, like because of the delusions, hallucination.
Mm.
We had some people coming in to make sure she didn't fall. But she was a woman who was so strong, lived alone, and now went from that because of Parkinson's to having to have, rotating shifts of people coming through, and even that scared her. But then even today as a caregiver, I don't stop, which is not smart all the time. But I just feel like if we didn't meet today this morning, or let's say we had some kind of thing come up in our life, well, if we even reach one person today, we could change their life and they know they're not alone. That's why I keep fighting. But do you have any suggestions on how not just an individual Parkinson, but even nurses or family can take care of their mental health? That's the most important question, I think.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So when we think about Parkinson's, um, so we know that for various reasons, depression and anxiety is high. There's different studies that will say different sort of percentages. I think the sort of the well quoted one is that 50% of people will experience anxiety and depression if you get Parkinson's. I think anecdotally, I see it a lot higher than that. What we also know as well is that as the condition progresses, that there'll be other sort of mental health problems come up. So you mentioned about your mum with, the hallucinations and the delusions. We also know that side effects of the Parkinson's medications can sort of induce that as well. So it's, to be forever vigilant about it. In terms of people with Parkinson's, it's about having that conversation. So when I prescribe medication, I say, potentially these are side effects, and we need to keep that dialogue open so that people are prepared. And it's always, again, as a clinician, part of my assessment of people is to always ask them about their mental health, and how how their mood is, how are they sleeping. Again, you can capture a lot of things with a couple of questions, but how are they sleeping? Are they, how are they functioning in the world? So we know with Parkinson's that people's worlds get smaller. So not just handwriting, not just their steps, their world gets smaller. So it's about addressing that and keep it being ever so vigilant about when people are going, well, I'm not going to go out and do my usual perhaps yoga class or meeting my friends because I'm worried about falling, or I'm worried about having to dash to the toilet because I get this sort of sense of urgency with my my bladder. And it's about having that therapeutic relationship, I suppose, with the person with Parkinson's, so that they feel able to tell you that. I mean, I will ask about it, but for them to volunteer that, so that we can maybe put some mitigation around that, so that their life can still be quite fulfilling for them, and they have a good quality of life. But again, another part of my assessment is always asking the family member, the care partner, how they're doing. And I think you hit it on the head. Really, is that it's a full-time job, especially in those later stages of Parkinson's. And for some people in those later stages, they may go to care homes, residential homes, or nursing homes. And you know what? In those homes, it takes 3 shifts of carers and nurses to look after people and deliver care safely. But when you are that main caregiver, you're doing that 24 hours a day with no breaks, very rarely. So again, part of that carers assessment that I mentioned earlier is getting that done, or getting that carers assessment done quick and early, so that support can be given to them. So, for example, we did a carers assessment on one of my people on my caseload recently, their partners, sorry, and part of that was picked up was that they really missed going swimming with their friends. It's something that they gave up quite early on to look after their partner, but they found it so helpful. I think it was twice a week, and it helped with their mental health. It helped them to sleep. It helped keep their weight down. So what we were able to put in was a service of sitters, people that came in and gave them a break for 3 hours. So they sat in the home and looked after the person with Parkinson's, so the care partner could go out and have a break to do whatever they wanted to do. And that was really, really helpful. Social connection, George, and as a mental health nurse, I so strongly advise it. I don't know, I'm really influenced by the work of Brené Brown. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's an absolutely fantastic social worker, psychologist, and she says that we're hardwired for connection. We are not sort of isolated animals. We need others to be able to thrive. And I think that's still for people that are carers as well. So they need that social connection with others, because isolation is just so awful when you're feeling like you're the only person out there. So it's about, putting, and again, everybody's different. It's about maybe coming along to an online carers meeting. It might be having that 3 or 4 hours to yourself. It may be that you need a weekend away. So it's finding a nice care home, or maybe family members that will come in and take over the caregiving role. So it's something that we need to identify early as clinicians in the people that we care for and their carers. We know that if you guys break, it puts a lot more pressure on the system, just being very sort of cold and dry about it. So we need to keep caregivers going, and they can't do that without support. Or they can, but they'll break. And we know as well that care partners' health often is third, fourth, fifth down the line. Their loved ones are their most important things. So their health often will suffer for it. So again, it's being vigilant about that.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, there's so much incredible information that you provided and so much more. I mean, I could talk for 10 hours, but then you won't want to come back again. But I do have, I want to shift a little now towards more about Emma. And the final area is really, if you could leave some words of encouragement today for the Parkinson's community throughout the world, what would those be? And then if you have any final tips or any ways someone can reach you, please let us know too.
Okay. I think one of my big ones is don't be a passive recipient of your care. This is very much coming from a British perspective of how we're sort of so overrun in the NHS at the moment. Don't just sit on your behind and hope that people are going to come to you. Use your voice. And carers, you need to be an advocate for your loved one if they don't have a voice, is to look for that care. So we know if in this country, we used to see people every 6 months. They didn't have to call in. It used to just be given out the appointment. That doesn't happen, or very rarely happens in the NHS now. So we kind of say, if there is anything bothering you, you nip it in the bud before it gets too much of a big thing. We really don't mind you contacting us or you finding the information. So again, we encourage that self-management approach right from the beginning. So yeah, don't be that passive recipient of care. Educate yourself about the condition, educate yourself about the treatments for it. And there's lots of different ones. Exercise is amazing for people with Parkinson's, but also, and something that I feel so strongly about, and I think, George, perhaps this has happened later for you, is about finding your tribe. And you're very much part of the tribe now, George, of Parkinson's awareness across the country. But just on a small scale, for families to find others, because I think loneliness is so crippling, and it eats away at you. So to know that you're not the only person in this boat, and to sort of find your community, find your tribe, and I think that is so powerful and so supportive on this journey.
Thank you. And really, it's been an honor to talk to you and your experiences. I didn't even get to really most of the questions. There's just so much information. I think what you do, nurses, we need more in the world because of your heart and how much you do put in the passion. I do have, well, please also, everyone listening, share this. This is not just for the United States. This is around the world. We're a global family in this fight. please support Emma and donate if you can, or even just log on and look at Spotlight YOPD. They're an incredible
Definitely.
organization. I think I'll be speaking with Carl soon in the future. And
Ah,
all of you have again become my family, Parkinson's UK too. I do have one last note. This is a message for everyone in the England and around the world, and to you. But we love you, we support you, we care a lot about you, and you're never alone. I, along with Emma, will advocate for you, and together our voices are so much stronger. And I always say I'm just getting started because, as you know, every time you meet a new person with Parkinson's or a new family member, it's really kind of, you don't forget the past, but you have to be there right now for those individuals. And we fight for all those still struggling, their families, in memory of all those, unfortunately, who we lost. So I really just want to thank you for your time. And it's just been such an honor and beautiful conversation. There's still much more we can come back, I hope, in the future and revisit. So thank
definitely.
you again.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. I'd love to. Thank you so much for the invite. It's been an absolute joy. So, yeah.
I appreciate it. And again, we send our love from the US to everyone out there in the UK. And this has been another episode of Q&A with Sharon, son George. Please stay tuned. Please share. Please support Emma. And again, together our voices are so much stronger, and we will end this disease soon. I just hope we're all still fighting together, because that's the only way we're going to accomplish that. So thanks again, Emma. I appreciate it.
Thank you.